What's up YouTube? Today I want to talk about a really handy feature in Cubase that allows you to render out multi-track stems from your project with one click. So in a recent stream I talked about mixing tracks from stems and just in general using stems for performance or various different aspects, and quite a few of you guys asked in the chat how I did it. Some of you mentioned, oh, it's such a pain in the butt to go through your project and render the separate files one by one. I'm here to tell you that it's not actually such a pain in the butt. There is a feature in Cubase that allows you to do this with one click. As long as you kind of set up your projects in a pretty methodical way, you can utilize this function to be able to multi-track stem your project with one click. So what am I talking about? Let's dive in and have a look. So here I have a project that I'm working on and it's getting quite full, and I want to kind of comp it down into slightly easier to deal with stems, so I can kind of do a last final mix to fine tune everything just a little bit better in the mix. Now I'm kind of capping my CPU usage, so I'd like to be able to simplify things so that I can kind of hone into specific parts with maybe plugins that require a little bit more CPU usage and stuff like that. And something that I've found lately is when I kind of simplify things and stem mix them, I'm really able to, I don't want to say hear things that I can't hear within the project, because it's not like that. It's just that I give each sound, because there's kind of less channels to deal with, you're able to deal with things a little bit easier, and it almost feels like there's less problems because things have kind of been simplified a little bit. Anyway, let me show you how to achieve this very easily. Inside Cubase, those who are avid Cubase users, you probably know about this export feature. So what this allows you to do, you can click on export audio mixdown, and then it pops up a separate window over here. So here you'll notice on the left hand side, you've actually got the ability to choose single or multiple. Multiple allows you to actually render either single tracks or groups or outputs to multiple different audio files, and it allows you to kind of put in a naming scheme. So for example, here when I'm creating my projects and my templates, I try to keep things quite methodical in terms of how I group them, because I know that later on down the line I'm either going to try like perform them in Bitwig or something like that, and I'll probably end up needing the stems. So I end up doing things that setting up the project that makes it a little bit easier when it comes to this point. Like for example, naming these groups like mixdown percussion, mixdown snares, main leads, main synths, sound effects. I'm going to get into kick and bass and stuff shortly, because there's another slightly more advanced concept that I want to discuss with that. So how this works is you would essentially just choose the group channels that you want as separate mixdown files like this, and you can see here it allows you to it puts in the project name. As you can see, I've put in a typo here. It puts the channel name as well, so it automatically detects that it's a multiple file, and it uses the project name and the channel name. So that's pretty cool. That makes things a little bit easier. So I'm not going to do this now because I still want to include the kick and the bass, but I want to put them on separate channels. I don't want to use, generally when I'm making my tracks, I'm using a kick and bass group, because sometimes I want to maybe use a little bit of compression or limiting to kind of glue the kick and the bass together a little bit. However, when I'm bouncing it out to stems, I want the kick and the bass separate, and any kind of compression and limiting that happens on the separate files won't technically be gluing those things together. So how I go about that is I remove any like limiting or compression or anything that's on the channel, and I duplicate it, and then I save the preset. If there's like quite an advanced compression or whatever going on, usually it's pretty simple, then I'll save the preset and actually load that up in the mix file. I'll group the kick and the bass and the mix together, because the reason I want to separate them is because then I can really hone into the frequencies of like the kick drum and the bass, because I'm sure for those who followed my stream when I was actually doing the multi-track mixdown, you'll see I picked up quite a few things, and I was able to really fine-tune the kick and the bass, and I think those are such important elements within Psytrance that it's important to be able to do so. So here, what I want to do is I want to duplicate this group that I've made. So I've removed any type of dynamics processing is basically going to be doing gluing. Here I've just got some EQing and that kind of thing going on, so I'm going to leave that, and let's just duplicate this. So here what I want to do is I want to call one of them the bass, and I want to call one of them the kick. So here, I want to just jump into the channel of the kick, and I want to change, because now that group channel is called bass. So I want to send the kick to its own channel, which is kick. So essentially what we've done now is we've isolated those two, kick and bass. So what I want to do here is I actually just want to, let's rename these. Mixdown kick. I can color it red just to make it easier to see amongst all the other ones. So let me just explain to you guys kind of how I like to group things. So this is a little bit more of a minimal track, so there's no open hi-hat. But I do like to isolate the open hi-hat, much like I've done with the snares, for example, onto their own track, because often there's a little bit of EQ processing that I do in that final mix to both the snare and the open hat that I might not necessarily want to do to the rest of the percussions. So I often like to isolate those, for example, like the snares, open hats, and that kind of thing. However, there's no open hats in this project. So it's a 7-track multi-track mixdown as opposed to 8, which I kind of generally do at the moment. So yeah, let's jump back into the export window, audio mixdown, and then we can click multiple. You see it's saved that. We can just add kick and bass. And then we hit export. And it does the multiple tracks, everything at one click. Nice and easy. Okay, so here I've got a blank project. I've got my multi-tracks. Let's just drop these in here. So what I like to do is, let's just group them. I'm going to call this pre. Let's duplicate. And then mute this and call this post. Cool. That's that. Okay, so now we can look at grouping these again to kind of get that, we can actually hide these on the mixer. This is a cool thing about the Cubase mixer is you've got this visibility panel. So you can quickly just hide groups of tracks. Let's actually hide those inputs as well. We don't need those. To really hone in when you're doing a mixdown, because I mean, like, you don't need those other, we're not focusing on those. We just want to focus in on these 8 channels and get the most out of just these 8 channels, maybe in the groups as well for these channels. So anyway, let's add group channel to selected tracks. Let's call this kick and bass. Let's group the percussions. So now this gives us the ability to, because now we've freed up CPU space. Now we can, maybe add plugins that we wouldn't necessarily be able to within the project, because now we've got, we went from like 80% CPU usage to like 10%. So, and bear in mind, I'm also busy recording the video, so it's probably, realistically, it's probably somewhere like 1% now because it's just audio files. Anyway, for those who know my channel, you probably know that I'm a massive fan of the acoustical audio stuff, specifically their compressors and EQs. They sound fantastic. The problem, though, is that they are quite CPU hungry. So often using them in a project space becomes unrealistic if you've got a lot of VSTs like synths and that kind of thing loaded. Anyway, so here let's for example use something like Acoustica Sand 3 to maybe try glue kick and bass together a little bit. I believe this is like a SSL G-Bus compressor when you set it onto C mode. I might be wrong. I do forget some of the settings and whatever. But anyway, I generally set it to C. This was what sounds good when I'm trying to kind of glue kick and bass sounds together. So here I'm going to overdo it a little bit by reducing the threshold quite a bit, increasing the ratio and makeup gain, so I can really hear what the attack and the release are doing. Okay, now I can reduce the effect of it once we've kind of got it, once we've kind of found the groove with the attack and release. So this is another magical plugin, Soothe, both in the like higher frequencies to remove that kind of harsh tone, but also with these sounds like in this kind of like mixing context where you've got a sound that kind of like dips into the low frequencies too much or the low mids too much, but you don't want to end up EQing that entire band out and damaging the other sounds that might happen in the track. So Soothe is a kind of adaptive EQ process where you kind of set what frequency range it kind of hones into, and it only reduces it when it needs to. So with these snares that are a little bit too kind of crunchy in the upper mid-range, Soothe again is an amazing tool, but sometimes with transient or percussive sounds it kind of makes them sound a little bit too soft. So then I like to use Clip Shifter to kind of like emulate a sort of artificial loudness afterwards. See there, it's actually softer on the meter, but it sounds louder, which is an interesting little trick. Awesome, that's about it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Yeah, if you haven't yet, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. If you want to support what I do here, check out my Patreon. There's links in the description. I've got various perks there, like early access to upcoming videos, presets for Vital, Serum, Phase Plant, all the stuff that I do in my videos. And yeah, I've also got a thing like an inner circle group, which I offer like one-on-one feedback. There's also a couple of other members in the group that offer feedback as well to your tracks, various different perks. So yeah, definitely check out my Patreon if you're interested in that kind of thing. Yeah, anyway, see you guys next time. Cheers.